As you see, Europe is
I'll take attention. I'll need you to take seats all over the panel. If we can. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Polish Institute of International Affairs, I have an enormous pleasure to welcome all of you and introduce to you our fascinating guest today, Europe's ministers from France, Germany, Poland, Michael Roth, Harlem Désir, Konrad Szymański, and already I have good news to you from the Polish Institute of International Affairs. Some good news. First is that Europe is still alive. 9 days before referendum in the United Kingdom, and this full house in the Polish Institute of International Affairs is also a proof that European issues, the European Union is quite high in the agenda of people in Warsaw. There is another good news I would like to share at the beginning. It is that Weimar Triangle still works, and however, from time to time there have been a lot of rumors about its not existence. The good news is that the ministers meet together and they try to steer our ship of the European Union in the right direction. And what is the right direction? They are going to tell us this morning. And I would like to introduce to you a moderator of this panel, Karolina Borońska-Hryniewiecka, who is in charge of European Union project in PISM, and actually he's also the co-author of our recent report on the European Union and actually on EU-United Kingdom relation if Brexit happens. So a kind of the study what we are going to do if sky is going to hit us heavily. Without further delay, I would like to pass the floor to Karolina, and I wish all of us inspiring discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director. Am I heard well? Yes? Perfect. Good morning, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished ministers. I'm really honored, and it's a great pleasure for me to be able to moderate this panel, because it's a panel on the future of Europe and of the vision of Europe, and precisely the European Union, about which everybody asks today. The multiple crises facing the European Union, both from outside and from within, increase importance of such meetings. Many people believe that this is a defining moment for Europe. And if it is so, then who, if not you, ministers for European affairs, can define the future of the EU better? Just after the British society decides whether to leave or to stay in the European Union in just 9 days, it will be your governments of the most important member states, that will shape the trajectory of further integration. That is why I'm very, very interested in hearing your postulates, in hearing your visions, in hearing your policy interests, and I'm sure we can expect a range of interesting views here. Since we only have less than an hour, and after my questions, I would also like to give the audience opportunity to ask questions. I'm not going to extend and prolong, and I will switch to the first question, which is actually very much related to the title of our debate today. And the title is The Vision of Europe, Weimar Triangle Vision of Europe. So my question is, can we actually talk about a Weimar Triangle vision of Europe these days at all? Or are we rather facing gradual divergence of political interests within this trilateral forum of cooperation. And if you allow me, Minister, I would like to direct this first question to our guests, Minister Michael Roth. Thank you.
Very much, and good morning to everybody. I'm extremely delighted to be here with my colleagues, Konrad and Harlem. Europe is our life insurance in times of crisis, and politicians are obliged to do whatever is possible to safeguard Europe and to work for a better Europe in these challenging times. And I'm extremely grateful that our political parents founded 25 years ago the Weimar Triangle. Poland, France, Germany take a special responsibility for Europe, for functioning, for democratic Europe. But the Weimar Triangle is much more than regularly meetings of politicians. The core of the Weimar Triangle format is a vital civil society. And that's why I'm so grateful. In the last couple of years, we established very strong contacts, friendships between Polish, French, and German people. And we have to take into account the tragedies of our history. And this is a cornerstone, and this is a gift for all of us. And I hope that there is a chance for all of us, for our generation, to foster this cooperation. Without a close cooperation based on trust, confidence, and mutual understanding, the European Union wouldn't work. And this is not just a typical German attitude, I'm sure. And after our conversation this morning and last night, I'm fully convinced this is a joint position of my colleagues in France, in Poland, and in many, many other European countries.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Désir, what is your take on the Weimar Triangle today?
Well, first, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here and to have this opportunity to address to PISM people invited for this seminar together with Konrad and Michel, and I thank Konrad for welcoming this new Weimar Triangle meeting today. We are celebrating the 25th anniversary, and when the Triangle was established, it was because there was a will after the enlargement of 2004, or in the preparation of it, to say that Poland will have the same kind of role as the center of the European construction than France and Germany before. And then we wanted to say clearly that we want the biggest country of the new member state to be at the heart of European construction. I think it's still valid today. Europe has to face many challenges. Of course, our three countries can have different views on some issues, but fundamentally, we think that we have to establish this triangle of common will, of solidarity, of shared vision, of the way to tackle these issues. These challenges, they are linked to globalization, they are linked to our surroundings, to the instability around us. The past 2 or 3 years has been dominated by a kind of succession of crises. Some of them linked to internal problems like the Eurozone crisis, but most of them are not linked to things happening in Europe. the crisis in Ukraine, the war between Ukraine and Russia in the eastern part of Ukraine, the war in the Middle East and in Syria, and the consequences on migration, the refugee crisis, what is happening in Libya, which also have direct consequences on us, terrorism, and even the economic crisis of 2008, and which began in the US. But at the end, it's a necessity for Europe to have common answers. Otherwise, it becomes European crisis. And so we have to work on this, and at the same time, not only to react to crisis, but to try, as ever in the European construction, to draw lessons and to try to build new step of the European solidarity and European integration. It's very difficult because, in a way, the reality is always going faster than us. We have to decide that 28 member states under very complicated rules, which are the base of democracy, because we are 28 sovereign nations, but at the same time we have decided to link our destiny together. But of course, the reality of the world, as well the emergencies of crisis and the economy, are going very, very fast, faster and faster. So this is one of the challenges, and we can only build the answer on the confidence, on trust, on the will to go further together, on the conviction that it's absolutely impossible to have 28 different answers to the situation in Ukraine, to the relationship with Russia, to the answer to terrorism, to organize our economy in the digital world at the time of energy crisis, if we want to be efficient for our citizens and to protect what we have in common. The fact that we want to build society of freedom, social cohesion, peaceful continent, all this is at the core. We forget this. But at the end of the day, when you look at what we are facing, it's about our project of society. And I think we have accomplished a lot during the past 60 years of European construction. All the countries of the continent who were able to join European Union after the fall of the wall, or after they emancipate themselves from dictature in the south of Europe, for example, after Franco for Spain and so on, they joined the European construction. So this is a very enthusiastic project, but it's very complicated to manage, and we have to go back to the core. Do we think that we need it in the future? If we think that we need it for our view of the future of the society, we must ensure to get results on each of the challenges we are facing.
Thank you. Minister Szymański, do you think we need this project anymore? And in this context, there are many voices. One of them are saying that Polish-German relations could have been better. Others are saying that they have not been better than today, that they are so good. In terms of the Polish-French axis, there has been certain distance in them, and sometimes you can get the impression that there is not a real stake between France and Poland at the political level, because obviously we have very strong economic links with both of the countries. So what is your view from the Polish corner of the triangle?
Whatever will happen in Poland, France or Germany in terms of political change, we are neighbors till the end of the world, I presume. So it is enough to say that we need intense dialogue, because we are not only one of those important countries of member states of the European Union, and we should be responsible for the future of the project, which is at the moment at the very fragile moment, I would say, but it's also important in terms of general architecture of the project. It's really impossible to imagine the European Union today without Germany, but it is also the truth that the main strategic risks for the Europe itself and the European Union itself comes from East and South. So the triangle represents very well the responsibility for all important aspects, all important challenges we have today. It's impossible to define a correct proportional response for the southern challenges without France. It's probably impossible to find a correct Eastern European policy without Poland. So I think there are plenty of reasons why we should be in a dense, intensive dialogue about the future which is unknown. That's why a kind of attention, a feeling of fragility is so present in our countries. Because we really don't know what will happen. And it's not only about the referendum. Of course, the Brexit deal is a very good example of a milestone of a future, which is not so predictable as it was before. We used to live in the European Union, which is a technocratic, highly predictable, well-managed and fully controlled project. It is not the case at the moment. We have to restore our personal responsibility for the future of that project. And of course, we are at the very beginning of the story because we just started the process of adaptation, and probably the British referendum will be seen in a historical perspective as something important in this process. But this is just the beginning of the story. This is the beginning of the highly needed adaptation of the European project, and the British deal, I believe, in some aspect, is not only about the British worries. It's about the general problem, horizontal problem we have with Europe today, and proper implementation. And of course, after proper answer, we can hear in Great Britain, proper implementation, proper understanding of that deal could lead us to the proper answers for the challenges we have today. I just want to mention the question of the national legitimization of the project, of the European project, the awareness of the different capacities, different capabilities of the member states inside the Union. I just wanted to mention the fact that we need a kind of new meta-politics of the Union. Whatever we think about it, because sometimes it's a worrying or rather unwelcome message, but it's the piece of the reality, and we have to respond to this fact. So all what we can say responsibly today is the fact that we have the feeling of responsibility for the future, that we know that the future is unknown, then we understand the role of France, Poland, and Germany for the future of the Union, because we are so exposed for different risks, and we feel it. And that at the very beginning of the adaptation, with a referendum in Great Britain on the eve, we can say that we have a quite common intention that Europe and the European Union should survive, because it is worth defending, and to survive it is highly needed to adapt. And this is, I would like to repeat it one more time, it is not the end of the process, it's not the middle of the process, it's the beginning of the process, which will be developing in the coming months and years, because the problems we have today are not very easy to solve. Probably that kind of declaration that we have an intention to European Union to survive would be quite empty 5 or 7 years ago, because we haven't had that kind of impression, nothing substantial to say it. But in these circumstances we have today in Europe, I think it's important. We have an intention to find a way for the European Union to survive and to develop and to adapt. The adaptation is a precondition for this survival of the project, which is worth defending.
So thank you. Let me stay with you, Minister, because I wanted to ask you a question with regard to what you said at the Wrocław Global Forum 2 weeks ago. You said something that I really remembered. You said that after 12 years of the EU membership, Poland should switch into a more contributory mode. And you said that our government is ready to contribute to the European project, as opposed to being only a passive audience of the project. So my question to you, which I'm going to repeat later to other guests, is in what ways Poland can or should contribute to the European project today, and in what ways this contribution could be shared with partners from the Weimar Triangle?
contribution means responsibility and means active role in the process. It is something serious because it could provoke the tensions. Because it's very obvious thing, a very obvious fact that in many different angles of the European Union we have different intentions or different sentiments, different reflections about the future of the project. But among the friends, you can't be silenced. Among the friends, you can't be too general because it is unfair to send a very general message that yes, okay, everything is fine. If the project is in trouble, we need a kind of sincere dialogue, sincere declaration of what we really need. And of course, on the other hand, we have to be prepared to correct our own opinions, all of us. And I think the first months of the new government in Poland show us very clearly that we were very active in finding a proper way in a very tough, fragile, problematic and to some degree deal with Great Britain. We tried to find our own responsibility in the process, not without a price, I would say. We will see what price it really is, but of course it is not a very obvious thing, and I think we took responsibility for this. And the second aspect is evolution of the migration policy, the evolution which is represented very much at the moment with the EU-Turkey deal. We were involved in spite of the fact that we are not directly affected by this wave, but it doesn't mean that we treat the migratory crisis as someone else's crisis or someone else's problem, as a, for example, German problem. It is not a German problem, it's a European problem because indirect consequences, indirect influence of that crisis, for example, lack of trust for the European project, means a big trouble for the integration, means a big trouble for the precondition of the Polish welfare and security. That's why this interdependence is well understood in Warsaw. That's why we are ready to be involved in every important process in the European Union, including the future architecture of the Union, including the future nature of the Union, which could be represented very symbolically by the British deal.
Thank you. And my question to Minister Désir. What is the French idea for the European project? I know that you and France generally are very preoccupied with what is going on internally, economic challenges, social challenges, and also the forthcoming elections. It seems sometimes that France is a little bit stuck to pursue a more ambitious European agenda at the moment. Am I correct, or is it just the impression?
Well, I think whatever will be the result of the UK referendum, it's clear that there is a need to relaunch the European project. Of course, it will not be the same if UK remain or if it leaves the European Union. And we clearly want and hope that the citizens in UK will choose to remain. We think it's in UK interest, but also in European interest, in EU interest. And this will also have to be follow up, even if they stay, because there is the implementation of the agreement in February. There will be a lot of work on this, but it doesn't concentrate all of the agenda of European Union. There is a crisis of confidence. There's a lot of skepticism. Citizens wonder if European Union is efficient, is able to take decisions, is a protection, is a support to prepare the future. So we think that there is a really important need to have an in-depth discussion among EU member states to the future on the future of the project, and we want it to be shared not only by EU by Eurozone member states, but by all EU member states, and especially to avoid the division between East and West, and that's why also the Weimar Triangle is a very important fora for this discussion. And we think especially that it is absolutely necessary now to make very strong progress on security issues, the control of our external border. It's also a condition to maintain our principle in terms of asylum right, and to have a control and well-managed migration policy. It's also an issue of pure security regarding the challenges of terrorism, of course, and it's absolutely clear that if we want to maintain Schengen, we have to ensure this control of our external border. But if we think about security, there's also a part of it which is linked to what we are able to do together in terms of defense European policy. It has to be done as a complementary to NATO. There will be a very important summit in Warsaw here, where we have to take strong commitments, each of the EU member states who are member of NATO, in terms of what we are able to spend and to give to the defense effort. But there is a part of this policy which has to be developed also in the European framework. And of course, there is the support to the economy, to investment. We are still behind the level of investment in Europe as it was before the crisis. So it's our potential for the future which is at stake. We need to invest in a lot of fields, in energy, which is a very important issue which has been raised by Poland since a long time, the energy union, the need to ensure more security of supply, to invest in infrastructure, in interconnection. We have also underlined the very important dimension of climate change and its articulation with the energy policy of Union after the COP21. And here too there is a potential of innovation, of jobs, of competitiveness for Europe. But there is many other fields. We have begun to treat this with a Juncker plan of support to investment. But we must ensure that Europe is a place of innovation, of very strong growth, support to SMEs. Of course, a part of it is linked to the achievement of the internal market in many domains, energy, digital economy, services, but it's also linked to the fact to support investment, to avoid too much imbalances, economic and social imbalances in Europe. So those are, for us, some of the main issues. It's very difficult. Some of them are very political, especially all the issues linked to security. But Europe will not survive, that was the term of Konrad, if it doesn't take this issue seriously and if it doesn't organize itself on this issue.
Thank you, Minister. You mentioned British referendum, and my next question actually goes in that direction. And this will be a question to Minister Roth. But before I ask this question, I wanted to take this opportunity to advertise to you a PISM report that we have just published a week ago on probable EU-UK relationship after a hypothetical Brexit. Why am I saying about it? Because, and by the way, this is only a summary, and the full version will be ready tomorrow online. Our conclusions in this report are quite interesting. On the basis of the analysis of economic ties and economic policy preferences, we have concluded that if Brexit happens, it will be especially in the interest of Poland and Germany to maintain the strongest possible integration of Britain within the single market, possibly even by granting it certain influence on EU regulatory policies, precisely because of certain common approach and common vision to economic policy. And I wonder to what extent this is a viable option, but probably before you could answer that, you would have to read our report, so I really recommend that. But that was not my question, actually. That was just an advert of our report. The question is, how will the British referendum define or shape the future of European integration? I'm asking about the British referendum because there can be two scenarios. One, which we all wish against, and we cross fingers not to happen, is that the British society decides to leave. And then the question is, what direction is Europe heading? More ever closer union, because we will not have a member state that might be viewed as a blockade of this process? Are we looking at a two-speed Europe or maybe more differentiated integration? And how does Germany view its position after potential Brexit? And also, what is the German idea in case British society decides to stay by a small margin? We can expect that this will be a small margin. And what will be the next step? Because in my opinion, the worst case scenario would be if we all agree for muddling through. So, Minister, what is your take on that future? Very not distant future.
Yeah. You raised again and again the €1 million question. But this question is in the hand of the British people. It's not a forward-looking strategy if every country is just interested in its own backyard. And it's not the size what really matters. What really matters is creativity and is the attitude in order to shape the future of Europe. It's in our common interest that UK stay in. And for me, as a committed European, it was hard to accept the UK deal. But at the end, this is the offer of the British government and all supporters of the Stay In campaign, that UK has a chance to remain a strong, vital partner within the EU. And I would like to quote my distinguished colleague Konrad. UK will remain our neighbor and our partner. And the UK deal shouldn't be a blueprint for anything. After the decision of the British people, we should send a clear message that we take the concerns of many people in many corners of Europe, that we take these concerns very seriously. But on the other hand, we have to improve the capabilities and the willingness of the European Union to tackle all these challenges and problems in a globalized world. I'm not very much in favor of less Europe. Alem already mentioned so many challenges. And I don't see just national problems. For sure, the nation states, the member states, will remain key players. But on the other hand, we need these quite complicated and sometimes boring relationship between the EU institutions in Brussels and 28 member states, probably 30 or 31 member states in the near future. Because outside the European Union is a success story. Just one example. If Poland or France or Germany would send a message to the Western Balkan states, we are not really interested in an EU perspective for these states. Do whatever it is necessary, but not as a member of our club. That would be horrible, not just for the stability, for peace, democracy, rule of law in this region. It would be a catastrophe for all of us. And that's why we need more self-confidence within the European Union. On a global stage, the European Union is a role model, but the European model is under pressure because the EU is much more than a single market or a Eurozone. We are first and foremost a union of common values. That's important. We have to live on these values. And we have to defend these values. We have to foster these values. Not just in speeches, but also in practice. I'm sure that at the end, all our friends and partners in the European Union will be happy, extremely happy, if the majority of the British is going to vote for stay in. But this is
contingency planning.
Yeah, this is a paper. Thank you very much for these ideas. I must read it. But now I'm very much focused on the idea that UK will remain within the club. And I hope that there is a chance to invite UK to play a constructive role within the EU. That's my major job in these challenging times.
Thank you, Minister. Of course.
Just 2 words. Of course, I hope the British deal is not a blueprint for the rest of our time and the future of Europe. I don't want to spend another month talking about non-contributory in-work benefits and exporting benefits, etc. This is not a European problem. We have much more sophisticated and much wider problems on the table. But in the same time, the deal represents, at least symbolically, represent the problems we have in Europe, the problem of national legitimization of the European process and the problem of diverse expectation or diverse capabilities in Europe. That's why I think there are some thoughts, some intentions, some reflections inside the logic of the deal, not maybe deal itself, which could be studied after the referendum anyway. The bad news is the fact that whatever will happen in Great Britain, we will come back to the table talking about these problems because one way we will have a need for implementation. In the worst case scenario, we will need to find a proper relation with Great Britain. So for the next couple of months or maybe years, we will stay with this question anyway.
Of course, and let me stay with this question and let me stay with you on this question as well, if I may. The current Polish government is viewing the United Kingdom as one of its main allies within the EU and shares very much the vision of European integration. And as much as we don't like to say, what if, I would really like to hear what is the Polish idea for itself, what is the Polish vision for itself in the EU without Great Britain. Because as we know, if Britons vote to leave, and the polls are fluctuating very much these days, and they are a little bit pessimistic, then we will find ourselves in Europe without the British Europe deal, which means in Europe with less safeguards for differentiated integration, and we might find ourselves asking with whom we want to build this future trajectory. So if I might force you again to answer this question, what if, please?
Some other colleagues we have on the table, so it's not that dramatic. I think the role of the Great Britain in Polish perspective is deeply related to the question of security, not especially the European Union itself. The security is the main challenge of today's Poland, and that's why Great Britain is so important, because whatever will happen during the referendum, Great Britain will be a vital factor of the European NATO forces and vital member states of NATO, who is reading our opinions and who understands our opinions and our preferences in terms of NATO adaptation much better than others. So I wouldn't link this aspect to the strictly European Union question, because whatever will happen, we will need to find a correct way, correct scenarios for the future of the European Union. And we remember that in the European Union we have at least 28 or 27 capitals, and we understand the role of some capitals we hold a specific relations, because not maybe because of the scale, as Michael mentioned, but because of the role, responsibility, creativity, and we know where the solutions has to be consulted and where the solutions should be negotiated. And of course, this European Union world is much more progressive.
Before I pass my voice to the floor and give audience time to ask their questions, one last question, which all of you kind of mentioned in your contributions already. Euroscepticism and democratic deficit of the EU, a lack of trust in the EU. To our surprise, the latest poll is showing that the Polish and Hungarian societies are still very much, let's say, Euro-enthusiastic. I mean, they are believing in the viability of this project, which is very positive to me. But what should leaders like you do, and what should their governments do to revive trust in the European project as it was since the beginning? Because my impression is that today many people, especially young people, take Europe for granted, take the European heritage, everything that is constructed with the EU project for granted. They've been born in it, they have it, and they don't respect it anymore. What should you do as leaders to change it? Maybe let's start from Minister Désir and then Minister Roth.
Yes, the roots of Euroscepticism are very various. Perhaps a part of it is what you said, the fact that European citizens take it for granted and they are disappointed that doesn't produce more. Part of the skepticism, I can say this for my country, is also linked to the economic crisis. For the first decade of its history, Europe has been built at a time of growth. That was reconstruction time. The unemployment rates were very low, and when leaders proposed to increase cooperation through the common market, common agriculture policy, before that steel and coal community, there was a support because at the end of the day it works. And you can say that it was a part of this general context where the economy was growing, the condition of living of the working class, of the middle class was improving. Since the end of the 70s, during the 80s, we have made a lot of progress in the European integration. We have even built for some of the member states a common currency, but it doesn't solve the economic issue. It doesn't mean that some of the countries doesn't have a strong and very successful economy, but in other parts of Europe there has been a lot of question about the monetary policy, for example, the Stability and Growth Pact. Are the rules really fair? Are they adapted to a growth supportive strategy, and so on? So I think a part of it is very much linked to the economic and social situation, and we have built a lot of instruments there again to prevent too much consequences of crisis. Banking Union, ESM, European Stability Mechanism, to support countries like Greece confronted to a big crisis. We have built a lot of defensive instruments, but I think we need to work on the offensive part of the European economy. And now, since especially last year, I think this issue of migration has become very important. And that's why I underline the importance of the control of external border, the implementation of all what we have decided in terms of reinforcing Frontex, creating a real common guard coast and coast and border coast agency, all the mechanism of reinforcing of the Schengen system. All this, I think, is absolutely key. But we also have to combat an ideology of nationalism, of extremism, of refusal of cooperation, because you can also look at some country where there is a good economic situation. There has been the refugee crisis consequences, but even before that, you had populist nationalist movement, very strong, anti-European, even in the Scandinavian country, for example. The extreme right was already strong in Austria before the refugee crisis. So you also have to have the battle on the front of the principle, of the value. Do we think that in the world of tomorrow we'll be stronger just alone? And this we have to promote it. I'm absolutely convinced that if you look at all the big challenges, I mentioned a lot of it, some of them are linked to security issues, some are linked to the economy, to the globalization. It's absolutely clear that we can only bring answer if we are together. But here we have to defend this idea and to confront the nationalist trends which are existing in the politics of Europe.
Thank you very much. Ministers, I'm sure you have a lot to add on that, but since we are running out of time, really, do you mind if we gather some questions from the crowd, from the audience, and then also you could come back on the Euroscepticism while answering them? Maybe 15. Who has to catch the plane? Let me take 3 questions from the audience now. The lady over here, please. Just a second, please.
I would like to come back to the issue of our meeting. I'm surprised that it was so little said about the Weimar Triangle. In my opinion, in the last years, it was not active at all. And you elaborate the situation in the European Union and about Brexit. It is a huge theme. But I would like to come back. What do you think? I am turning it to our minister from Poland, but to other ministers as well. What is the instrument in which Weimar Triangle can influence and act in a European Union? We know that it is now the voices that the Eastern Europe wants to have a more powerful voice in a European Union. But in my opinion, Weimar Triangle links West and East, if we call Poland East. They are 3 partners. So in my opinion, it is a very important role.
Thank you. If you don't mind, let's gather other...
Yeah, I know, but
yes.
I want to turn back to the Weimar Triangle. Yes. What is the opinion of the functioning of this mechanism?
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's gather 2 more questions, if we... Oh, just 1 for the moment, and then we will address them. Please, gentlemen here.
Thank you. Jędrzej Bielecki from Rzeczpospolita, that's a daily newspaper here. I have a question to Harlem Désir, because you said that there is a need for offensive measures now to make the economy grow. Do you foresee a need for further integration of the Eurozone, maybe in terms of fiscal union, a separate parliament of the EMU countries, a separate budget? And if so, what would be the reaction of Germany? That's a question to Minister Roth. And a question to Minister Szymański, if in that case Poland will not be left on the margin, because as we know, there are maybe, I don't know, 15% of the Polish population which wants to join the euro. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we have more time for questions for the moment. If you could address the questions, Minister Szymański, on the role of the Weimar Triangle.
Thank you. With the British deal, again, we proved that we are quite open for an architecture of the Eurozone. And I think that's also intention of the Great Britain, because we agree that the Eurozone has a full right, legitimate right, to find the proper instruments to fix the situation inside the Eurozone. It's our best interest to fix the Eurozone in the nearest future, because it's our main trade partner. The only condition, which is very, very simple and I think quite within the hand, The only precondition is the fact that we don't want to accelerate any kind of disintegration of the common market. And that is fully represented in the British deal, and we will repeat the same position in the future negotiations about the future of the Eurozone. So it is not a problem itself. It's a problem how to implement the proper instruments the Eurozone wants to have, not at the expense of the internal market, because this is something which works very well. So I think it's the last thing which should be somehow damaged with new architecture. About the triangle, I think it's somehow comparable with the situation of the Union itself. Maybe we should be more vocal in public. That's why I proposed my guests to have a panel here, an open panel, to show that there's something is going on. The time when the Triangle was a kind of anniversary organization is past. Now we are totally absorbed with every week, every month consultation within the European Union. That's how it works. And that's why maybe it's not so visible as it was before. But it doesn't mean that this mechanism and this instrument doesn't provide a proper opportunities to consult an answer for the future. I just want to remind that my predecessor organized the same kind of consultations less than a year ago. I think that was autumn, just before the elections. We already had a triangle, the Weimar Triangle consultations of agriculture ministers, of finance ministers in Berlin, and we already planned another consultation with our format, a European ministers format, in autumn in Berlin. So we have, I think, an impression that there are a lot of things to talk about, and I think this format will be alive, especially that we have a feeling that there will be a lot of questions put on the table, not very easy questions, about the future of Europe, and it is important to have a voice in this format which represents so well the general backbone of the whole European Union, I would say.
Thank you. Minister Roth, do you share the view of your colleague, and do you think there is more than declarations to that project, to the Triangle?
The Weimar Triangle is still alive, and it's our common obligation to do whatever is necessary to dynamize it, to revitalize it, and we agreed on the next meeting in the near future in autumn this year. And what makes the Weimar Triangle so crucial? Our friends in Poland are very much focused on the Visegrad format, and this is a regional format, and I'm sure that different kinds of cooperation within the EU structures, which deserve the interest of a united Europe, is in our common interest. And there is a lack of ambitious compromises within the EU. And that's our job, to establish forward-looking, sustainable compromises which are attractive for the EU 28. And there is room for improvement, for sure, but it's not too late. And the Weimar Triangle is fascinating not just for the three countries, but also for the European Union, because it combines different traditions, different perceptions, new and old. Central Europe, Eastern Europe, Western Europe. Non-Eurozone member, Eurozone members. That's unique within the EU structures.
Unique but effective. Is this mixture, does it have a potential to deliver?
It's our obligation to improve it. And I'm extremely grateful to the Polish people. You highlighted that Poland is the country of committed Europeans. Not Germany, not France, not Italy. Poland is the country of committed Europeans. And this is an obligation for all of us to fulfill the expectations, not just of the Polish people, of many other peoples around Europe, to work for a better Europe. But without Poland, without France, without Germany, it wouldn't work. And that's our common experience. I know quite well that sometimes it's difficult between France and Germany to establish a sustainable compromise, but at the end it works. And our compromises we established in the past were extremely attractive for our friends and partners within the EU. And that's the content of the success story. And the room for maneuver, or the room for improvement, is in a closer cooperation with Poland and with many other countries. And I would like to come back to you, the other question one of the participants raised. This is the economic and monetary union. I fully agree with Konrad. The Eurozone takes not just responsibility for the Eurozone, for the club, but also for the European Union. But please, join the club. Join the club. The club is open-minded and welcomes everybody. And this is the tragedy of countries like Switzerland or Norway, and tomorrow I'm going to visit Norway again. Norway is not a member of the European Union, but Norway has to adopt 95% of the European legislation without a chance to influence the whole decision-making process. That's a tragedy for Norway, but I can't change it. It's in the hands of the people in Norway. And I'm very much in favor of deepening the EMU, not in a theoretical way, but you know quite well that the Eurozone has to cope with serious problems and challenges in terms of economy, social imbalances, and so on. And we have to prevent next crisis. And I don't see any chance for a new order of competences or for a treaty change in the near future. But I'm fully convinced that we need a more binding coordination within the Eurozone to stabilize our welfare states and to improve economic competitiveness. Our problem is we have to cope with too many imbalances and we have less convergence. That's the tragedy. And in the long run, we need more convergence and less imbalances.
Sorry, of course. Please, come in. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. First, on the Weimar Triangle, I'm absolutely convinced that if we want Europe to survive and to go forward, the Weimar Triangle is absolutely indispensable. We need it. It's not only something of the past, of the time of Poland to join European Union. There is a lot of tension in Europe, a lot of risk of dislocation, and the participation of Poland, France, and Germany at the heart of all the EU project is absolutely vital. On the question regarding integration of the Eurozone, well, if you look at, I fully agree with what Michael said, but if you look at the situation, single currency is a success. A lot of economists, especially elsewhere in the world, for example in the US, when it was created, says it could not work because you could not have a single currency if you don't have an optimal monetary zone with all the elements of the economic integration. It survived to many crises. It has been reinforced. It brings a lot of security to the economy of the participant of the Eurozone. It's an international currency, and it's a success. But at the same time, it's absolutely clear that there is a lot of economic and social imbalances in the Eurozone, not enough convergences between the economy of the zone. There is a problem of governance, of confidence. It's very difficult to have a monetary union without a real economic union. That was something which was already said by Jacques Delors at the time of the Maastricht Treaty, but, well, we were not able to build all the instruments of this economic union. So that's why I think we have to go forward. We wish other member states to join the currency. Under the treaty, this is what is planned, and we wish Poland to join when it chose to do so. But I think that at the same time, we need also to deepen the integration and the functioning of the Eurozone without having to do a big treaty change or things like that. But there is new instruments which can be built to improve the functioning of the Eurozone. Certainly to reinforce the capability of investment. There is a lack of investment. There is a need to reinforce growth. There is a need to support some sector of the economy which will encourage more investment and more growth. In some countries, it's mainly in the infrastructure. In others, and in all of us, it's in the digital economy, in the energy sector, in the transition of energy sector. There is a need of associating better the parliaments, especially the national parliaments. So we have to think about a way to have more association of national parliament and European Parliament to the decision took in the Eurozone. So we think that it is in the EU interest, because it's the main market for all the member states, the Eurozone, and that it is in the interest of all the EU member states, because they all have to join at a time the Eurozone, except UK, of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ministers, for sharing your time, which is very busy, and your schedules are very tight, coming here and talking to us. I'm optimistic after this debate. I hope you are too. And please join me in the applause to appreciate the presence of our ministers.